The mass killer in Denver and Lakewood mentioned 4 of his targets by name in his alt-right revenge novels, and then he went out and started killing people, just as he described in the books. We're learning a bit more about the last woman killed that night. She was an artist determined to help those who felt excluded by society. Omicron cases are sweeping Colorado, typically less severe, but the symptoms are showing up more quickly than previous strains. The stock show will require vaccinations for the animals, not for the humans packed inside. And every political reporter should be asking questions the governor doesn't want to hear.
Oh, my goodness, Marshall.
Marshall's unauthorized question and the governor's answer on Next. Monday's mass killer named 4 of his targets by name in his alt-right revenge novels, in some cases explaining in detail where and how he would kill those people before he went out and did it. One of the 5 people killed was 67-year-old Michael Swinyard, ambushed in his condo overlooking Cheeseman Park, just as the killer wrote that he would do. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
You'd hardly notice it, if not for the noticeable evidence a gunman left behind at a high-rise near 13th and Williams in Denver.
I heard what appeared to be 3 gunshots coming from across the street.
Travis Leiker is the president of Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, the neighborhood organization with an office right next to the condo, where a gunman talked his way inside and shot 67-year-old Michael Swinyard in one of the units. He was one of 5 victims killed on Monday, connected to the same shooter with multiple crime scenes in Denver and Lakewood. An internal email sent to the residents at this Cheeseman Park condo building described how the shooter got inside. That he was dressed as a police officer. The security guard cooperated with his demands and escorted him to a specific floor. He forced his way into a unit where he shot and killed Swinyard. He forced his way out of the locked lobby, where 3 bullet holes are marked on the shattered door.
What's equally concerning is the fact that this seemed to be premeditated.
Leiker uses the word premeditated because of books published by the shooter. One of them, from 2018, describes in detail a very similar way of how he would get into a Cheeseman Park condo to kill Swinyard and others.
I'd like to know why somebody who had documented writings and cited specific properties and specific people in the city, that we were not made aware of that.
Multiple times yesterday, Denver's police chief said that the shooter had been on the department's radar twice over the last 2 years. But we do not know if they knew of the writings, but sources tell 9 wants to know that someone in law enforcement knew of the writings in the book. But they didn't say if it was Denver police, FBI, or someone else. We do know, Kyle, that Denver police never did an extreme risk protection order, a red flag alert, where they would go to a judge to have a person deemed a danger and have weapons taken away from them temporarily.
And that, Marshall, again, is an option that is open in Colorado, both for concerned family members, but also for a law enforcement officer that might believe that there's a situation where there's not been a crime committed, but the person is a clear danger.
And there is a database of every time that someone has done this, and Denver police have requested this dozens of times for other situations, but not in this person's case.
Marshall Zellinger, thank you. The killer's writings, these 3 books, are a toxic stew of open racism, hatred for women, and bragging that heavily armed alpha males are going to kill their enemies and rule the world. The books were published in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Another target mentioned in the killer's books, a man named Jeremy Costello. He survived when the shooter came for him on Monday. Costello told us today that the shooter had been in the tattoo business with him years ago. Costello says on Monday the shooter broke into a home that's attached to his business on 6th Avenue. Costello and the others inside were able to escape. According to Costello, the shooter's ex-girlfriend had warned him that he might be in danger.
When we split friendship, she came by like a year after that, so maybe that was 5.5 years ago. And yeah, she said that he was literally planning on killing me just because I walked away from the business, and I wasn't really a part of the business. I wasn't on the paperwork to the business. I didn't make money from the business.
Costello says the shooter put a sticker on his business a while back advertising this book of his, but Costello decided not to read it. He told us he never knew that he had been marked for death in the killer's book until after the shootings. The final person killed on Monday was a woman named Sarah Steck. She's working the front desk at High's house in Lakewood at the time. She is being remembered this week by those who knew her best for her love of art and music and for her beautiful laugh. She graduated from MSU Denver last spring with a degree in communication design. Her academic advisor tells us she focused her talents toward graphic design projects that could elevate the voices of people who are misfits or outside the cultural mainstream. And he told us that her light is going to be greatly missed.
Every single one of these tragedies of violence is someone that lots of people know closely and tangentially. All those people are devastated by that news. And then beyond people knowing them, there's a lot of people who love those people. There's a lot of people who depend on those people. We see ourselves passing away with our family, at home, with our pets, not just going to work a shift at the hotel and never coming back.
The hotel where Sarah worked is temporarily closing and relocating the guests that were staying there. An update on something we've been talking about throughout the afternoon on 9 News. Eastbound I-70 through Glenwood Canyon is back open, reopened in the last 5 minutes. It was closed for hours this afternoon because there's a huge crash that involved more than 20 vehicles. Colorado Governor Jared Polis is considering clemency for Rohel Aguilera Medeiros, the trucker who caused that terrible crash on I-70 that killed 4 people in 2019. But the governor would not say when we asked him today if he's been in contact with the celebrity who is pushing for this clemency. Aguilera Medeiros' century-long sentence has drawn national attention. A jury convicted him after deciding that he had other options to deal with his failed brakes other than slamming into stopped traffic that day. The case has brought attention to Colorado's mandatory sentencing laws, and there's a hearing scheduled for January 13th to reconsider the length of the sentence. This might not get that far if the governor decides to grant clemency or to change the sentence himself. Advocates have been pushing for him to do that, people including Kim Kardashian West, who's championed pardons of other inmates in the past. She tweeted about the Aguilera Medeiros case last week and said that she prays that Governor Polis commutes his sentence. Our Marshall Zellinger heard that the governor and Kim Kardashian West had been in direct contact about this criminal case, so he directly asked the governor about that.
I've communicated with many people, and so I don't have any specific references to that, but I'm always happy to hear from people that are interested in cases across the country. I've met with the victims with regard to this particular case that you're indicating. I did not meet with his parents. They requested a meeting. We did not do that, but I am willing to take meetings as we traditionally do on clemency and probation.
A lot of words there from the governor, but nothing suggesting that he has not been counseled by Kim Kardashian West on the clemency. Governor said he expects to roll out any news around clemencies or pardons in the next few days. Those typically come at the end of the year. That new year's coming, a fresh start. And for some of our newest neighbors in Colorado, they're preparing for a new year in a new country after they fled the collapse of Afghanistan. So, resettlement is the first step in that journey, and you generously helped with those immediate needs a few months ago. Now our new neighbors need assistance putting down roots so that they can thrive and become self-sufficient and successful in Colorado. Your Word of Thanks microgiving campaign this week supports Hope Communities, as that nonprofit helps Afghan newcomers navigate life in Colorado. I want you to meet Lainey Hashem. She's Hope Communities navigator who works with resettled Afghan families in the way that only somebody who speaks their language and knows their culture can. It helps them find resources and training, services that they need to become connected to life in Colorado. With all the Afghan families brought to Colorado, there is more demand for Lainey's navigation services than Hope Communities can meet. So they're raising money to bring on additional staff with the language and the cultural skills that can help our new neighbors thrive. That airlift out of Afghanistan certainly had the nation's attention, and it had your generous resources in that moment. So now those families are our neighbors for the long haul, and we have the opportunity to help them start the new year in their new country with the continued support they need to thrive. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 and I'll send you that link to donate. Heads up, Sprint and T-Mobile customers, you need to use the QR code because your carriers block our fundraising text. Even $5 helps when enough people chip in. So as always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us rolling. Colorado has a reputation that dates back decades as a place where refugees and other newcomers are welcomed and thrive long-term as part of our community. So let's help our newest neighbors from Afghanistan succeed, even after most of the public attention has shifted elsewhere. COVID cases and the positivity rate in Colorado have tripled in a few weeks. That's Omicron. The government's shorter quarantine guidelines seem like a business decision, not a public health judgment. We'll ask Colorado's top health leader about that.
In 1981, it was discovered that Prime Minister Golda Meir had actually lived in this house in Denver.
One of the most important world leaders of the last century wasn't an American official, but she did live in Denver. That's next. The Omicron variant now makes up 91% of COVID cases in our state right now. It was 1% of them 2 weeks ago. The number of new cases per day has nearly tripled in recent weeks. So Omicron appears to be faster moving, but also less severe for the vaccinated. And it's changing health leaders' approach to quarantines for the people who get it. For asymptomatic folks, it's recommended that you quarantine 5 days, down from the original 10 days. People concerned about the new guidelines have said that this is just the CDC bending to the whim of big businesses that want employees back at work sooner. Colorado's chief medical officer, Dr. Eric France, says recommendations are adapting, like the virus.
If this were a year ago and you were exposed, breathed in COVID virus in 2020 Christmas, your symptoms would occur about 6 to 7 days later, around New Year's Eve. That's what we saw with the Alpha variant. Now, imagine instead that it was a Halloween party on Saturday and you breathed in the Delta variant. Your symptoms would start on today, actually, 4 days later. So it's a shorter incubation period with Delta. And now we have Omicron, and the incubation period is even shorter, 1 to 3 days.
Dr. France says not only is the incubation period shorter, so is the time that it takes your body to shed the virus to the point that you're no longer contagious. Colorado's test positivity rate is now the highest it's been all year. 15.5% of COVID tests come back hot over the last 7 days. Highest we've been since the backside of the first wave all the way back in spring of 2020. Tonight's next question comes to us from a viewer named Lynn, curious whether the ton of at-home COVID testing going on around the holidays is counting towards our state's positivity rate. That is a smart question, Lynn, and the answer is no. So the state asks people to self-report positive results to the state health department, but even when those counts come in, they are not part of the statewide positivity rate. That only counts PCR and other professionally administered tests. Keep the questions coming. COVID or not, big or small, we'll answer those questions. Helps if you record them on video or audio and email it to next@9news.com, and we'll work to get you an answer and make all of us a bit smarter. Our patient count from COVID is starting to trend up again, or so it would seem. 1,088 patients currently in Colorado's hospitals with diagnosed COVID cases. That's up 31 patients from the day before, up 62 patients from this time last week. And yet, large gatherings still continue. And you should know you're going to have to wear a mask inside the National Western Stock Show next month because Denver has extended its mask mandate. But organizers are wink, wink, nod, nodding that it's no big deal if you don't wear a mask. The Stock Show returns on January 8th. Last year's event was canceled due to COVID. Stock Show organizers say that masks will be required in the rodeo area, horse show arena, and all indoor spaces, but the policy will be, quote unquote, lightly monitored. Humans entering the stock show are not required to be vaccinated. Animals entering the stock show do have to be vaccinated against a variety of diseases.
How about some New Year's Eve snow and cold for Denver? There's a huge storm coming in that's going to bring snow and wind to the high country. The coldest air of the season hits over the weekend. Plenty cold today. We started at 11, warmed, if you can call it that, into the low 30s. We'll get a little break tomorrow ahead of a Pacific storm that will combine forces with cold air to the north, and that will mean heavy snow in the high country. Winter storm warnings out for 10 to 20 inches of snow Thursday into Friday, and hazardous travel in and out of the mountains. Denver, we don't get our snow until Friday morning, but I've got about 3 to 6 inches of snow forecast here in the city by the time you hit Saturday afternoon. So, yeah, get ready. Some changes for sure. Tonight, fair skies and 18. Tomorrow, we get you some sunshine and 50 degrees, and then we welcome in the new year with bitter cold and a little bit of snow ahead of a nice warming trend for next week.
This house is a standing tribute to Golda Meir's commitment to freedom, peace, and dignity for all people.
The fourth Prime Minister of Israel, one of the most influential women in world history, once lived in Denver, preserving a little-known piece of her past. Next. Denver is dotted with houses once called home by people whose names ended up in the history books. One of those homes was considered so important that in the 80s, it was moved across town to preserve it. Our Mike Grady takes us to a house once owned by one of the most powerful women of the 20th century, Golda Meir.
This house is a standing tribute to Golda Meir's commitment to freedom, peace, and dignity for all people. Golda Meir was the fourth Prime Minister of Israel. She was the Western world's first female head of state. She was on the world stage and one of the most important politicians of the 20th century. We're so fortunate that one of the world's most prominent politicians actually lived in Denver, Colorado. The Golda Meir House Museum was originally located on the west side of Denver at 1606 Julian Street, actually in the kitchen of the house, where late at night, Golda was able to participate in these parlor meetings with intellectuals of Denver and talk about unions and socialism and rights for workers and all sorts of other ideas of the time that really helped her and inspired her to become the leader that she became. It was about to be demolished, and there was a group of concerned citizens that worked tirelessly to save it. And eventually the whole house was put onto a truck, and it was taken off of its location on Julian Street and moved through the streets of Denver. And finally, in the late 80s, the Auraria Campus Board worked very hard with the city of Denver to save the house and move it to its current location on the Auraria campus. The house stands proudly against anti-Semitism and hatred of all kinds.
January 10th, they'll dedicate a new mezuzah encased scroll on the doorpost of Jewish homes at that house, and it'll be a chance to honor many of the people who helped preserve it over the years. Through your generosity, you helped Afghan refugees get resettled in Colorado months ago. Now we have a chance to support them long-term as they build roots in our community. We'll have that and your feedback about which causes we choose to feature next. One of your most successful Word of Thanks campaigns in 2021 was to help resettle Afghan refugees in Colorado. Together, you all raised nearly $250,000 in the week that the airlift out of Afghanistan was in the news. Now, those families are our neighbors in Colorado. And as we head into the new year, they need help getting established and connected long term. That's where Hope Communities comes in. That nonprofit's navigator, Lainey Hashem, has more Afghan families here needing help than she alone can provide. So the nonprofit is fundraising to add another navigator who speaks the language, who knows the culture, who can help these families find the resources and services they need to become self-sufficient and successful Coloradans. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me in donating. I am told that you all have overwhelmed Hope Communities' fundraising website tonight. It's a good problem to have. It's like when you show up at a restaurant and there's a line out the door and they tell you you're going to have to wait an hour for the table. You might have to wait a little bit, but you know it's going to be awesome, and you know that you're in good company. Brian writes in tonight, says, I am torn on this one, this fundraiser, especially when I see homeless camps down the street. Brian, I hope that you gave to last week's fundraiser, which was to combat homelessness in Colorado, and resist the false choice to think that we can only help one or the other.